Coming up on Chasing the Natty, it's that time of year where we all scour the internet and social media looking for any kind of information coming out of spring camps as they begin all over the country. Well, fear not, my friends, as Chris and I are going to be taking you through about a dozen spring camps and programs and what takeaways you'll need for your drafts and rankings. All of this and more coming right after this.
Looking to throw. Caught. Tony off and running. He doesn't lose foot races. Touchdown Miami.
Jackson going to the end zone. What a night both Sparks make it four.
Shakes through a couple of tacklers. Still on his feet. Hawkins to the end zone. Unbelievable.
This is Chasing the Natty, a college fantasy football podcast. All right, welcome in everyone. This is Jared Palmgren, host of the Chasing the Natty podcast. Hope you guys are having a wonderful ride to your work on this Monday morning. We are the College Fantasy Football Podcast on the Campus of Canton Podcast Network. You can find us in all of your podcast feeds and on YouTube every Monday morning during the off season at 6 a.m. sharp. If you want to support the great work we do here, head on over to campusofcanton.com. Subscribe there with any of our phenomenal tiers. We got content ranging on all sorts of college football games, whether that be CFF, Devy, C2C, Underdog, Best Ball. You play it, then we've got content, whether that's tools, rankings, pretty much everything you need to succeed. In fact, right now, if you want to support the show directly, make sure when you sign up for one of our yearly membership tiers, use that promo code NATTY, N-A-T-T-Y, to get 10% off of your yearly membership. Again, that is promo code NATTY, N-A-T-T-Y. If you can't do that, totally fine. You can just show us some love by leaving a like, a comment, and a subscribe on the YouTube side of things. If you're on the podcast side of things, just leave a 5-star review. Make sure you're following the show. Not only does that show us support, but also the entire game of college fantasy football in general, a ton of support. If you got any further questions or want to get in touch for whatever reason, you can find me the show on Twitter. I'm at CFF_Jared. The show is at Chasing the Natty, and the handsome fellow joining across from me, his face no longer squished, is Mr. Chris Battistel at FFChrisB. Chris, welcome back to the show, man. Appreciate you taking over the show last week while I was at my cousin's wedding. You and Nate look like you had a great time. Let's keep it rolling. Let's let the good times roll here once again with us, man.
Yeah. I mean, always ton of work sitting in your chair, Jared. I've said it once and I'll say it again. You make that first part of the show look absolutely easy. And I think with same thing with Chris Moxley and with Nate Marquise, I appreciate their patience fully, because I think we did about 5 takes of me just fumbling over myself, trying to tell people that I hope that they're enjoying their drives in this Monday morning. So I had a lot of fun with those two guys, and I'm looking to, like you said, keep the good times rolling, man.
Yeah, the good times will roll. It is that fun time of year where, again, like I said in the intro, we're just Googling, searching social media, just trying to find any kind of information out there. And as always, it feels like it's harder and harder every year as coaches get more and more vague every offseason, not really wanting there to be a ton of information getting out there. But thankfully, it seems things are lightening up a little bit because there's no longer that second portal window. The coaches aren't as afraid of guys leaving. Guys are locked into contracts more. I know a lot of people are saying like, "Oh, we're coming in we're going to have a ton of guys just drop out of their programs and re-enroll somewhere else and stuff like that." I really think people underestimate how much these programs and the NCAA are kind of going out of their way to try to prevent that kind of thing, that kind of circumventing. Again, Jake Retzlaff showed how to do it last year. They're well aware of that being an issue. I don't think they would take away that second portal window without realizing that that is something they also needed to address. So I'm not as worried about it. I hope the coaches figure that out soon enough. I know I complained about it on Twitter earlier. So many spring games are still not being televised this year, which I really hope gets fixed in the future, because man, it really sucks not having that. But Chris, how's spring research going for you, man?
It's been fruitful. Just being able to find a little bit of knowledge or a tidbit of information when you're an early drafter like we are, Jared. Anything to set apart a camp battle or trying to find the edge in a wide receiver room or maybe a tight end that's maybe under the radar right now is going to give us all the advantage that we are looking for in these early drafts, because we're drafting guys we know. That's why a lot of these drafts are really running back heavy at the beginning, because we know these guys are proven commodities. But being able to just dive into some of these programs that have already started to run their spring camps and being able to pinpoint some of these future game breakers has been a ton of fun, man. I'm looking forward to this episode.
Yeah, I definitely think so. And I think the position that most people are really looking out for is that wide receiver position, right? Like you said, running backs feel pretty settled, at least for the top guys. Quarterbacks, very settled for the most part. There's a few big time competitions, namely Alabama. We could talk about that in a little bit here. But wide receiver, man, that is the most wide open position. And there's definitely some things to take away from in these early ones. But I will admit, though, after I kind of plugged in some of these guys into my rankings and everything, it turns out I'm not. It's not quite as hopeful yet, in my opinion, as some of these names, because I plugged in, like, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 guys in my rankings today based on this news, and only one of them made it inside the top 100 for my wide receivers.
Oh wow!
But they're like we'll talk about them all, and they're all interesting. But again, they should stay. My point is, a lot of the wide receivers I talk about today, I'll talk about them kind of glowingly, but they should stay late round guys for a good reason. So that's just kind of my takeaway so far.
Disclosure at the beginning.
Oh yeah, not a lot of guys yet that need to be flying up your rankings yet. Again, we're in the middle of the spring, right? Last disclaimer before we get into it is, obviously, if something confirms my priors, then it is locked in, it is golden, and it is going to be 100% what happens in the season. And if it doesn't confirm my priors, well, it's only spring. A lot can change between now and fall. Right, Chris? Is that how this goes?
I like it. Protect yourself early. I like it.
All righty, well, let's get on into it. But first, before we get there, before I forget again this week, let's go ahead and throw it over to our benevolent overlord and Austin and have us talk about some of our great sponsors today.
Hey guys, Austin here to talk for a brief moment about Home Field Apparel, the best place to snag clothing for all my favorite schools and teams. Whether it's tees, sweatshirts, hats, joggers, or pretty much anything in between, Home Field Apparel has retro designs with a modern twist to satisfy fans from Ohio State to Drexel to Colorado School of the Mines. Plus, it's some of the comfiest clothing that I own. Use our promo code CAMPUS2CANTON, that's campus, the number 2 Canton at checkout, for 15% off your first purchase. What's up, guys? Austin here again to let you know about our partnership with Fast Draft, a best ball and DFS platform that hosts a ton of different contests. With the season over and season-long CFF best ball behind us, I know I'm looking for new contests that can scratch my drafting itch, and I think I have found just the thing. Fast Draft has a rookie-only contest called Origins. Each draft has 8 teams in it and is 6 rounds long. And as I've mentioned earlier, you only draft incoming 2026 rookies. I know I plan on max entering this thing, and I think it's going to be a ton of fun. So head on over to Fast Draft, and when you sign up, use code C2C, that's C2C, for a deposit match up to $50. Happy drafting.
All righty, so we are back. Appreciate that, Austin. Chris, let's get on into it. Again, sorry for everyone out there, but the graphics are relatively limited this week because I was running out of time. But basically, if you're looking, you'll see I got myself a little magic square, and that's going to tell you which team we're talking about from here on out. So we'll start with the team that is on, and that is Notre Dame, definitely one of the bigger programs out there right now. A lot of people are, pinning them as almost a main character of this upcoming season, right? Because of the lack of a better term, the temper tantrum they threw at the end of last year for not getting into the playoff. There's a lot of narrative around them of like, oh, they're coming out in full force this year. They're not leaving anything to doubt and everything. You're either highly rooting for them because of that, or you absolutely hate them because of that. Regardless, there's gonna be very few people who don't have an opinion on them. But that's not what we talk about here, Chris. We got to talk about what kind of stuff can we expect out of them for fantasy. And this is not a program that, well, never mind. I won't say that because obviously we had Jeremiah Love last year, who was, RB2 on the year, right? Like, pretty fantasy relevant team here, right? Now, wide receivers, not as much. Tight ends, yes, but we'll talk about all that. Well, actually, we'll go ahead and talk about those wide receivers, right? Based on reports from Fansided, Irish Illustrated, the Notre Dame site over at 247. There's been a lot of talk about these wide receivers coming in. They brought in Mylan Graham and Quincy Porter from Ohio State. They bring back Jordan Faison, Micah Gilbert, who is a talented freshman they had last year. He's set to come in here. So, Chris, I'll throw it over to you here, man. What are you kind of hearing about these wide receivers at Notre Dame?
Just that, there's some positive buzz, at least right now, from Mylan Graham, the transfer over from Ohio State. But if he kind of works more towards the slot with the system, it could just be hype right now. We've seen it time and time again in the spring. Some of these names coming out of Notre Dame's camp of these wide receivers potentially making a name for themselves don't really produce in this season. They kind of almost fall on their face. So wide receiver wise, if I'm going to try to pinpoint one, if I'm going to try to take one on my fantasy teams, at least right now, because of the system and because Denbrock's scheme kind of favors those outside wide receivers, I'm going to lean a little bit more towards possibly Jordan Faison than I am going to be Mylan Graham, no matter the amount of hype that he gets, at least in spring. If that accumulates into good news and good talking points going into the summer and going into fall, and he's really head of steam, he's got a full head of steam going into the season, then I might change that a little bit. But as of right now, for me, Jared, it's Jordan Faison. What have you heard? Is there anything that you think that might be against what that's coming out, or what is your ear to the ground been telling you about this wide receiver room?
Yeah, I've heard the same positive buzz. Mike Mylan Graham has kind of stood out. I do find it really interesting that they're moving him to the slot. That's a big slot. He's 6'1", 192 on Notre Dame's roster page. Like that's not an old measurement there or anything. That's a pretty brand new one. That's a pretty big slot. Now, that's smart on Notre Dame's part because I do think that's putting your three best wide receivers out there between Faison, Graham, and now Gilbert as well. Again, we'll see if Quincy Porter maybe makes his way into that. He's injured right now, so he's not really full go. We'll definitely see. But I certainly agree with you that despite the fact that the last 2 years we haven't gotten much out of the Notre Dame wide receivers, we do need to pay attention because this is still Mike Denbrock running this system. Like we've seen what he's done with Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas in 2023. Granted, that was a near perfect offense that they were running. They had everything clicking there. But, he also had Khalil Lewis in 2018 and Alec Pierce in 2021. Like, those were both guys solid for CFF. But the pattern that I notice here is that the guys that tend to blow up are guys that have experience at least a year in this system. So that's why I'm super hesitant about Graham here and this hype coming out here. One, like you said, he's in the slot. Typically, it's outside guys that benefit from Denbrock's system. Malik Neighbors really being the exception. And as we saw, he was a first-round wide receiver going to the NFL after that. So clearly there was a talent advantage there that helped him out. I don't know if Graham really has that, considering that he's done nothing over the last 2 years. And to expand on that point even further, as our benevolent overlord Austin Nace would say, beware these year 1-0 transfers, right? Yeah. Mylan Graham absolutely fits that here. Over the last 2 years at Ohio State, despite being a 5-star coming out of high school, or he might have been 5-star, high 4-star, can't remember. Regardless, clear blue chipper. In 2 years, 12 targets, 6 receptions, 93 yards total. Right? That's pretty rough. And
yeah,
it makes me kind of worried a little bit about the Mylan Graham hype here. I fully agree with you. If I'm going to take a shot here, I'll go Jordan Faison. Or if I'm going really late, honestly, I'm kind of interested in Michael Gilbert. He'll be playing that X position, right? Like Faison's playing more of that Z position. Michael Gilbert could end up being that down the line deep threat. We'll see. Very much just a super cheap option. If you want to invest in the system, I would go for those two guys before I went Mylan Graham. The other interesting thing, I mean happy thing here, is that Aeneas Williams really getting a vote of confidence early in this spring. Now he is limited right now, but when these beat reporters are talking to Mike Denbrock, he is giving some very glowing quotes here. Quote, the thing about Aeneas that I think people forget is that, every time he's been inserted into a game situation or we've called upon him to do positive things within our offense, he's delivered every single time. Another quote, I don't anticipate that being any different moving forward, referring to, them relying on the run game. Continue the quote. So to me, it's an exciting time for him, referring to Aeneas Williams, because there's an opportunity in front of him that I know he's been working very hard for and ready to seize. That's pretty glowing right there. Obviously, they got the two freshman running backs coming in, and Jonas Walton, and I forget the other one off the top of my head. But this really does seem like it is Aeneas Williams' backfield. Now, does that mean he's going to be Jeremiah Love? No, Jeremiah Love was a beast, and Aeneas Williams, while very talented, was very clearly the RB3 last year for a reason. So I do think there'll be a little bit of a step back, but if you're drafting Aeneas Williams right now, I think you got to feel good based on these quotes. What do you think, Chris?
Yeah, those two quotes right there, that's not just generic praise. That's trust coming from Denbrock. And in college football, that usually leads to opportunity. We don't need Aeneas Williams to be the full bell cow to matter in the system. If he's leading that room, he's gonna be fantasy relevant. So he's the piece I'm most comfortable with drafting in this system for Notre Dame. It's got to be, for me right now, it's got to be Aeneas Williams, and then maybe the tight end in Flanagan, who has been impressing in camp as well. And then I'll probably chase the wide receiver hierarchy in Faison being first, Mylan Graham, and then possibly Micah Gilbert, or I could flip those two, Gilbert and Graham. But I'm always at least right now, going to have Faison on top. So for me, I like the offense, but it's going to be, I'm comfortable betting on Aeneas Williams as the piece that leads it for fantasy purposes. So I'm all in on Aeneas Williams, man.
You touched on tight end Cooper Flanagan there. Do you want to expand on that a little bit more? I don't think this is a name people have been really seeing go in drafts recently. Is that somebody we should be taking a look at?
Yeah. I mean, as a late round tight end, I mean, you're always trying to find that edge at the position to kind of help you be able to navigate not drafting the position early. If you're a drafter that kind of pushes the position towards the back end, middle of your draft, you're always going to try to find those. You're always going to try to want to find those tight ends that could stand out either early in the season, middle of the season, and pinpointing a tight end for the Fighting Irish is not a bad thing, and because they've been able to produce at a steady spot for you for fantasy, and the fact that he's being kind of being noted as the guy, as the tight end one, at least this early in camp, is kind of interesting to me. So Cooper Flanagan is definitely a guy that you're going to want to write down on your draft cheat sheet when you're walking into your drafts, just because of the history of the position at Notre Dame, man.
Oh, Notre Dame and Mike Denbrock. Mike Denbrock's absolutely always incorporated a tight end into his offenses as well. Maybe not to the degree that, Michael Mayer was seeing, back in like 2022. But since then, Mitchell Evans, 40 targets in 8 games in 2023. You saw Mitchell Evans get almost 60 targets in 16 games last year, or not last year, in 2024. Then now last year, Eli Raridan, 44 targets in 12 games. Like, that's their worst tight end production in the last 3 years, and he was still getting 45 targets. If Cooper Flanagan's the tight end one for Notre Dame, just quite frankly, I don't see how you leave him outside your top 20 tight ends in any of your rankings, just by default of knowing what this system does. The only thing that maybe they kind of makes you worry a little bit is the fact that they have upgraded at the wide receiver position potentially here, but at the same time, like they had Malachi Fields and Will Pauling last year. That was supposed to be their big upgrade at wide receiver, and they were still throwing to the tight end. It doesn't seem like that's going to go away. So,
Yep, I agree, man.
all right, Chris, I'll throw it over to you now. What team you want to move to next?
Ooh, bunch of sexy options on this graphic here, Jared. But I'm gonna go with maybe one of the least sexier ones. Let's
Okay.
do Boston College.
Okay. Yeah, I'm letting you take this one, buddy. I just being purely honest, I am not much interested in Boston College this year. I think that this could end
Yeah.
up like just my general thoughts here. I think Boston College could be a dumpster fire. I know Evan Dickens was phenomenal last year at Liberty, and I know that he's probably the only well, I don't say only option because Kalen Chudzinski is pretty interesting here as well. But like, I'm not expecting this to be a high scoring offense coming into 2026. So, what are you hearing here that's got you excited?
Yeah, they might look a little messy on paper, but I actually think the upside is higher than it seems. And the whole thing really hinges on Mason McKenzie, quarterback transfer. He's been kind of standing out a little bit in camp. He's been sharing quarterback one snaps with Grayson Wilson, right? There was another Grayson Wilson. There was another
Yes.
Grayson there, but I think he's gone. So Grayson Wilson is the guy that he's been sharing snaps with at the QB1 position. And if he wins the job, the ceiling changes immediately at the quarterback position for Boston College. He said himself this spring, I obviously can run a little bit. I ran for over 900 yards last year. And we touched on him a little bit in the transfer portal episode that we talked about a couple weeks ago, with how much his dual threat ability can be a problem. It's just, can the coaching staff take advantage of it? Because we like you've touched on in that episode, Jared, Bill O'Brien isn't really the best coach when it comes to scheming that dual threat ability and getting the most out of his dual threat quarterback. So when you look at his profile overall, you're talking about a quarterback who can create fantasy value with his legs alone. Wide receiver wise, Reed Swanson is a name I keep seeing come up in these reports about how much he's connecting with both quarterbacks. So he might be the wide receiver that you might want to take a little bit later in your drafts. And then for the running back room, the backfield still sounds like it could be a heavy rotation, which is going to be tough to trust early. Evan Dickens is set up to be the running back one, but how much of that running back one role is he going to share with the guys behind him? I fully believe it's going to be a RBBC approach at Boston College. They're going to be rotating running backs constantly, so I think that kind of really devalues what Evan Dickens is going to be able to do out of the backfield. And if even less so, if Mason McKenzie is named quarterback one for Boston College, I think that is really going to hamper the running back production as a whole. And then you mentioned Chudzinski, the tight end, feels more like a steady volume option than a big play guy. And with a quarterback like Mason McKenzie, there is opportunity for Chudzinski to see a lot of that underneath and kind of safety valve volume out of the tight end position, which is not the sexiest production. But if he's seeing 6 to 8 targets a game, and he's seeing a decent amount of red zone usage, he walks out of the season with 500 receiving yards and possibly 6 to 8 touchdowns. There's an opportunity there for him to finish as a tight end 2 with potential tight end 1 upside weeks. So there's really just the 2 players that I really want to focus on out of this offense. If McKenzie wins the job, I'm in, because the rushing upside can carry this offense, even if everything else takes time to develop. It's just, can the coaching staff get the most out of it, Jared?
Yeah, we'll certainly find out. I am, believe it or not entirely trusting of the staff that ruined their chance with Tommy Castellanos there. Now, maybe they have learned their lesson, right? I don't think they'd go out and get another quarterback like this if they weren't planning. Like Tommy C, they inherited, right? This one they went out and got. So I would hope they would be wanting to use the strengths of their new quarterback here. But we'll see. I agree with you. Chuzinski is great, a great tight end option. I got him at tight end 18 right now. Projected about 50 targets, just under 400 yards, about 4 to 5 touchdowns. I think, again, this is just one of those scenarios where he could just be their best pass catching option, and that's going to help you out a ton already. You mentioned Swanson, who is interesting because you're right. He does kind of keep coming up in these reports. I've got my eye on Jaden Skeet, who is returning from last year.
Yep.
But the other thing that's kind of interesting is, like you said, not only does it seem like there's a heavy rotation at running back, Evan Dickens is just not being mentioned in these practice reports hardly at all. And these are pretty detailed practice reports. Believe it or not, we're getting out of Boston College. Like they're pretty descriptive about like who's making plays and not. And Evan Dickens is just not being mentioned hardly at all. And that makes me think there's probably an injury going on, because otherwise I don't understand why he wouldn't be part of the main rotation right now. Maybe there's some other stuff going on. I don't know. I just find that interesting. And the thing that really stood out to me, like you said, Chris, McKenzie, I felt like every practice report I was reading, QB run touchdown, QB run touchdown,
Yep.
QB run touchdown.
Yeah.
If that's what they plan to do, that's going to be interesting going into the ACC this year. So I agree with you. I probably need to take another look at McKenzie, see if he kind of pops up in my QB rankings a little bit higher. Again, with QB being so deep, I don't know if I'm really going to want to invest in a quarterback on an offense that I don't anticipate scoring a lot of touchdowns. But it's definitely worth throwing him into my rankings just to see where I can get him at.
Yeah, and they got Ernie Adams on the sideline, so you can never discount a team that has a mind like Ernie Adams on the sideline. I think he's part of the staff as well. So I mean, the guy eats salted tomatoes like they're apples. So I mean, that's a guy you can trust, Jared.
All righty, let's move on here. Let's go to. Let's move on. Let's go talk about Alabama here, right? Obviously, another big time program here. Got some reports coming out of Sports Illustrated and Touchdown Alabama magazine. By the way, shout out Sports Illustrated, man. They have been killing it with the. They've been killing it with the beat reporters and the spring practice reports. Like honestly, I say they're better than 247 right now with the amount of detail they're providing. Just shout out them. Like you're going to hear me constantly referencing their work all night. There's two areas really to discuss right now. There wasn't a lot of information offered about running backs, and I'm sure that's something we can discuss a little bit later once we get a bit more word out of there. But the quarterbacks and wide receivers were where information was being offered up the most. And quarterback battle is relatively simple right now. Austin Mack, Keelan Russell being described as a very even battle right now. Austin Mack clearly the more experienced in the system. Keelan Russell being the more talented option, former 5-star and everything. And I am somebody that thinks that people are kind of dismissing Mack's chances of winning this job too much. But I do have to admit that Mack kind of needs to step it up, because if this competition is a dead heat right now and continues into the fall, his chances at winning this job are going to plummet by the day. If it's a dead heat as you get closer to the season, they're going to go with the younger, more talented option with more upside, right? Like, he needs to step it up. That narrative's got to change if he wants to keep this job. I currently have both of them in my QB rankings right now. I believe I have Mack at QB 40, and then Keelan Russell I actually have higher, believe it or not, at QB 36, because once again, I think he has that higher upside between the two, even though I do think I slightly lean towards Mack winning the job today, but, Russell, I think, has the higher upside between the two. You have any thoughts on that QB battle there, Chris?
Well, Mack has the kind of knowledge of, because he came over from Washington, right? With the coaching staff. So he kind of maybe has a little bit of the upside with what's going on over there. He probably stayed at Alabama with the inclination that he was going to be the guy going into this year with Ty Simpson leaving. But fantasy wise, I mean, give me Keelan Russell over Austin Mack at this point. I don't think Mack will give us all too much of fantasy production, but so for quarterback room, If I want to draft him, like you said, how you have Keelan Russell higher, that's the place that I'd want to go. I just don't know if they go there.
Yeah, I think we'll find out pretty quickly. And like I said, if we're coming out of spring and they're saying it's a dead heat, like I'll probably start treating Russell a little bit more like the QB1.
The one, yeah.
Wide receivers are interesting here. Obviously, Ryan Coleman Williams, pretty locked into a starting role coming into this year and is being described as catching every ball thrown his way, which is obviously a far cry from the drop issues that he's had, not just this past year, but really the last 2 years. And as of right now, it seems that his partners in crime are going to be Latsier Brooks and Rico Scott. There was a little bit of report that, Latsier was going to be put on second team. It doesn't, based on more recent reports, it really does seem like Latsier and Rico Scott are both running with the ones now. Like Sports Illustrated noted that they are wide receiver 2 and 3 in most drills. And even Ryan Coleman Williams specifically called them out during media time as, quote, the most compatible guys in our room. They want both of those guys out there on the field together. And the interesting thing to me is how this could impact where guys are playing on the field. Because last year, what kind of threw everything off with Ryan Coleman Williams was that he was kind of moved into the slot on a more regular basis, which was a very big change from his freshman year. Freshman year, he was, 78.7% out wide. In this past year, he's actually majority slot. Not, all there all the time. He's only 55.1% slot, and meanwhile, 43.9% wide. So very much being moved all over the field. But if you take a look at his, ADOT and reception depth, his ADOT dropped from 14.3 to 11.1 between the 2 years. His targets less than 10 yards down the field went from 43.6% of his targets to 55.3%, which, is a pretty significant move up there. That's going to hurt his ability, right? Like to some degree, that's going to hurt his upside, right? Like to some degree, this is on Coleman Williams, not being able to create yards after the catch and everything, but overall that move to the slot hurt him. But now, with Brooks entering the picture, he was slot pretty much full time last year. Does that push Williams back outside? I'd think so, right? And to me, that's going to add a little bit more to the upside here. I've got Ryan Williams projected at 85 targets, 51 receptions, 793 yards, and 6 touchdowns. No confidence discount because I'm pretty certain of this role. That's wide receiver 30 for me. Meanwhile, you got Latsier Brooks. I'm projecting him as the wide receiver 2, 75 targets, 49 catches, 730 yards, and 4 touchdowns. That's wide receiver 77 for me, by the way. Really goes to show just how smushed I think the median outcome is of how many wide receivers in that range. But even still, that's where I'm kind of at with those wide receivers. I also think Rico Scott, being that other outside wide receiver and being described as the fastest guy on the team, could be an interesting late round dart throw for best ball purposes, because I think he'll have some big games where he'll have some big touchdowns and stuff like that. Chris, what's your read on this wide receiver situation here at Alabama?
I'm investing in Coleman Williams as the wide receiver 1, like you mentioned, taking Latsier Brooks at a value, and then Rico Scott, I'm probably just maybe not investing at all. I've seen some reports with Noah Rogers making some noise. Cedarian Morgan, the true freshman, has looked pretty good. So I don't know how much of a role he's going to have and what the offense is going to want to do. But strictly for fantasy purposes, it's Ryan Coleman Williams as the guy that I want out of this wide receiver room. Latsier Brooks is maybe my secondary piece if I miss out on Coleman Williams and I want a piece of this Crimson Tide pass attack. It'd be Latsier Brooks. And then from there, at that point on, I mean, I'm probably chasing the running back position. I know you mentioned there hasn't been too much coming out from the running back position from spring reports, but Crowell, the true freshman as well. Xavier Crowell has been the guy that I've seen in a couple reports looking good out of that backfield. So he's probably the guy that if best ball, there's no waivers, his ADP is pretty good right now, that if you take a guy like Crowell, at the beginning of the season, he might not be that flashy, but he could be the guy that takes over the running back one role for Alabama as the season progresses. But you still got guys like Hill there in the mix. So it's too like I'm not going to reach up and take Crowell early, but he's definitely a guy that I want to walk away with some shares of, Jared.
Oh yeah, I've got Crowell as my RB1 for Bama this year. I'm not a big fan of
Yeah.
Daniel Hill being in that RB1 role there, and guys like Kevin Riley, like none of them have really taken that opportunity that's been presented to them in the past. I mean, again, the run game for Alabama was atrocious for a reason last year. Granted, that was also some offensive line issues, but I think Crowell can come in and be the difference maker. I've currently got Crowell as my RB90, but
Yeah.
that's with a pretty decent confidence discount because, again, I just need to see that confirmation that he is taking over that RB1 role, because if he gets that RB1 role, he's got the potential to move up to, let's see, where would that put him at? He would move up into my top 36 running back. So,
Okay. Yeah. And with his ADP, I mean, it's good value right there.
oh no, for sure. And let's see, actually, where is he going in ADP? Yeah, RB 121
Oof.
in ADP. Now, granted, that might be. I think I need to go in and fix some placeholders and everything because that might not be
Okay.
totally true there. But like he is going decently late in drafts, right? Because again, he's not in the system yet, so a lot of people are forgetting that he's even there. Chris, where do you want to go from here? What school you want to talk about?
Let's go Arizona State for 200, Jared.
All right, Arizona State 200. These or this quarterback coming over for Kentucky, or never. I'm trying to make a Jeopardy joke here, and it just it wasn't coming to my mind fast enough. This is what happens when I record at 9:00 at night. Chris, what about Arizona State do you want to touch on here?
It's one of the teams I'm not trying to overreact to all the everyone looks good stuff, but because a lot of the reports out of Arizona State is everyone looks good, but I do think eventually it kind of narrows down when you hear multiple receivers standing out in Omarion Miller, Reed Harris, and Vines Bright. That usually means roles aren't really settled yet, and for fantasy, that's the key, not who's flashing, but who actually earns or is going to earn consistent volume, because we already know they don't want one guy dominating like they had in previous years with Jordan Tyson. So the question becomes, does the offense condense or does it stay spread out? I do think that it does condense. And the guy I keep coming back to is Reed Harris in this offense. I touched on it in our transfer portal episode there, where I believe that Reed Harris is going to be the guy in this offense that is the favorite target for Cutter Boley. And that is because I'm not a big believer in what Cutter Boley can do in being efficient, pushing the ball downfield. I think he had 42 attempts over 20 yards last year, and he only completed 8 of them. That could be an indictment on his pass catchers. So I'm not going to put that fully on Cutter Boley. This could be the best wide receiver room that he's walking into. But if that's the case, the production is most likely to come in the middle of the field. And I think that's where the 6'5", 217-pound wide receiver and Reed Harris is really going to find his groove in this offense in the middle of the field. And in the red zone, the big body wide receiver in the red zone should see a decent amount of targets there. So I'm not chasing right now all the camp noise. I'm betting on Harris emerging as the guy based on how I think this offense is going to actually function. Running back wise, I mean, I can't pinpoint a guy right now. I know we've heard a lot about Kyson Brown, Jared. But what's your take on the state of the Arizona State Sun Devils?
I mean, one, I think it's pretty clearly like Cutter Boley's going to get this QB job. I think there is a little bit of talk about him competing with Mikey Keene, but I'm sorry, if you're competing with Mikey Keene in the year of 2026, you're going to win that job. I think your Reed Harris take's an interesting one. It is one that I can certainly follow the logic of. And again, it is also interesting that, again, according to Sun Devil source, again, shout out Nate Marquise for finding this nugget here over at 247. They did list the first team offense, and it was Reed Harris and Raiden Vines Bright that were listed among the starters, and Amari Miller is placed on the second team. But based on all of the reports coming out of camp, again, it seems like they are rotating that quite a bit, because I've seen clips of Amari Miller being passed the ball to by Cutter Boley. I will also point out to you, you kind of touched on it, like, Cutter Boley was in a hellstorm last year when it came to that offense. Again, that Kentucky team was just not very good last year. When your best wide receiver option is Kendrick Law and Harley Gilmore the fourth, you're not having a great time in the passing game there. I think this is a better situation for him. I think he's got better downfield targets. I mean, both Amari Miller and Reed Harris are just ginormous targets for him to work with. I think he'll have more success there. I agree with you, though, that the question becomes, is it too spread out, or can we at least get a concentration of targets to the top two guys in Miller and Harris? Because even in my projections, I don't, like, if I was just going purely off of what the system's done the last 2 years, I'd be projecting the top wide receiver in this offense to be getting 120 targets. I just don't see that happening whatsoever. It's one of the few situations in my projections where I just took over my target projection and said, no, 120 targets is not happening for anybody. But 85-ish targets for the top wide receiver, I think that's certainly still in play here. Again, I'm not saying 85 for both these guys, but I got them both projected with 85 targets, assuming that, again, there is a legit competition between the two of them for wide receiver one. And Amari Miller currently winning that projection between the two of them, but Reed Harris really not that far behind in terms of raw projections. I got Harris at 800 yards, 6-7-ish touchdowns, and then Amari Miller about 860, 7-8 touchdowns there. So if Miller, I trust Miller more than Reed Harris, but man, Reed Harris is such a good pickup compared, at least in terms of the value between the two, because Amari Miller is wide receiver 23 right now. And then let's see, Reed Harris is wide receiver 47. So quite a bit of gap between them, about 70 picks between those two. So I don't blame people for maybe just waiting on Reed Harris there. I want to hear more about the running back position, because, again, the top two right now in that first offense, according to Sun Devil source, again, Kyson Brown, Demarius Robinson. I was so big on Kyson Brown last year. I need to hear a little bit more to hear that he's healthy. He's going to take over there, because Jason Brown, who's running with the second team right now, he looked pretty good last year. So I'm kind of concerned maybe they go with a bit more of a committee approach here. We'll see, though.
Yeah, all right. Could happen.
Where do I want to go from here? I'm thinking. Let's go over to the Cougars of BYU. Again, got some good reports here out of Sports Illustrated and SB Nation. Their beat reporters for BYU. And this has been a spot that I've been kind of keeping my eye on for a little bit, because there's a big hole in my wide receiver rankings for a while here for who's going to take over for Parker Kingston. Obviously, if Parker Kingston didn't deal with the issues that he's dealing with right now, you're probably talking about a top 12 wide receiver for CFF this year. But obviously, we can't control these things, and he's gone. So that kind of leaves this big old hole of who's going to fill that. And the two names that are kind of popping up here are program veteran in JoJo Phillips, as well as wide receiver from Oregon, Kyler Casper, coming in. Now, last year we saw the split between kind of the slot guy and Parker Kingston, and then you got your big target outside of Chase Roberts. I was thinking, okay, then that still leaves the slot position wide open. But it was only 2 years ago that we saw Darius Lassiter and Chase Roberts, two outside guys, be the top two targets for this offense. I very much could see that happening again here. I mean, both of these guys are huge. Kyler Casper, I think, is 6'5", something like that. I have to look it up. Here, actually, let me look that up real quick. I want to make sure I'm saying this right, because I might be confusing this with somebody else. Kyler Casper, where are you? Yeah, he's 6'6". Yeah, this is the big boy I'm thinking of. He's 6'6", giant target on the outside. And I was thinking, okay, maybe JoJo Phillips is a slot guy. Nope, he's 6'4". So again, just two big targets on the outside here for Bear Bachmeier. I think one of these guys is at least going to end up being CFF relevant. It could very well be that both of them could end up being. I mean, 2 years ago, Darius Lassiter and Chase Roberts both putting up a pretty decent amount of yardage. I mean, Darius Lassiter had 700 yards, Chase Roberts had 850 in 12, 13 games each. Really, the problem's been touchdowns. This has not been a touchdown-heavy passing game recently. Maybe that changes this year, but that's really the thing. Like in my wide receiver rankings, like I plugged in both Casper and Phillips. Those touchdown numbers are really, really holding them back. Like again, I got Phillips at 4.5 touchdowns. I've got where's Casper? I got Casper at 5 touchdowns. So it's like that needs to be fixed in order for either one of them to be great for CFF coming into this year.
Sure.
But you got a feel on these guys?
Yeah, not necessarily a feel on who I want to take over the other. It feels like one of those rooms where we're hearing both names, but not a clear hierarchy yet. Like you mentioned, Phillips and Casper both being mentioned as wide receiver 1 candidates. That usually tells us that there's still a competition and there has been no defined role in this offense yet. And when that's the case, it's tough to trust early season volume. So I'm not going to be chasing really either one of these wide receivers, Jared. The more interesting signal to me is that tight end, buddy. And you know who's there. We talked about him a little earlier, and Walker Lyons keeps coming up as the tight end 1 guy for BYU. He's also being mentioned ahead of other names in camp reports, and that's usually a strong signal then this guy just looks good. Because tight end usage tends to be a bit more role driven than competition driven, especially in the red zone and underneath. The tight end role might be the first one that I bite on that out of this receiving room to be more usable out of Kyler Casper or JoJo Phillips.
Yeah, I'm moving him around in my rankings here, moving him up. I got him at tight end 20 right now, and he's kind of dealing with the same problem as the 2 wide receivers here, right? Again, the system touchdown rate isn't great here. His own personal touchdown rate, while not abysmal by any stretch, not grand either. He's got about a 5.9% touchdown rate so far in his career. He's currently projected at 3 touchdowns for me, despite the fact that he's projected at about 400 yards in terms of just pure yardage. That has not stopped me from picking him up constantly in drafts right now. I think he's definitely one of the higher upside tight ends. Obviously, the quotes here are great. Here from Sports Illustrated, at tight end, it's very clear Walker Lyons, the USC transfer, is the guy. The OC Roderick said Walker has been exactly who I already knew he was and who I expect him to be. End quote. He is one of the most talented tight ends BYU has had in years. And again, when you're talking about a wide open pass catcher room, where again you're talking about JoJo Phillips, who was wide receiver maybe 4, 5, 6 last year for BYU, being your main option now, and you bring in Kyler Casper, who I think had maybe 15 targets last year, just off the top of my head, like not much at all. Like this is a very big opportunity for Lions to come in and take over, especially the fact that Lions could have stayed at USC and been the top tight end for USC this year. But he decided, no, I'm coming to BYU instead. I doubt he does that without thinking he'll be a very strong asset for them. So,
yep.
All right.
And then just touching on the running back room there, there's reports of the LJ Martin injury. He's not really taking part in too much of the spring practice. Does that cause any layer of hesitation for you, Jared, because of where his ADP is and where we have him valued currently?
I mean, it causes a little bit of concern because he has been injured in the past, and that's really hindered him. But I also very much just read this as, hey, why risk our number 1 asset coming into this year, right? Like,
that's fair.
Again, they know what they have in LJ Martin. If there's any risk of him re-aggravating an injury, obviously they're going to do everything they can to keep him fresh and stuff like that, keep him involved. But there's no reason to risk that. Like if Martin, so goes Martin, so goes the season for BYU, and that staff knows it.
It's perfect. Yeah.
So, all right, where do we want to go from here, Chris?
Let's go FIU, Florida International.
All right, that's a fun one. I like it.
Yep. Yep. And it's FIU's actually pretty clean on one side, and at the moment, that's the backfield. Anthony Carey is being identified early as the replacement for who was back there? It's escaping me. I had it.
Hey, John Owens.
Yeah, Owens last year, and that kind of matters because in this tier, clear volume is everything. We don't need perfection out of Anthony Carey this year. We just need the touches, and it really sounds like he's going to get them, especially in an offense like this, you're not always going to get that high end efficiency. Volume can carry the value. So when you get into a situation where a back is emerging early, like Anthony Carey is, that's usually something I'm willing to lean into. And on the other side, the wide receiver room feels like something that's going to need some time to sort itself out. This feels like a take the running back now and figure out the wide receivers later kind of situation for FIU. I know before the show you mentioned one of the names out of that wide receiver room, Jared, but it's still when you put them into your projections, it didn't give you what you were hoping for based on what the wide receiver room was able to produce previously. So for me, what's Anthony Carey's
thunder,
ADP? Man. Yeah, sorry.
No, it's all good. Anthony Carey currently going as RB 83 in drafts right now.
83. Yeah. So I mean that's tremendous value for a running back that's already being labeled as the guy for FIU, buddy.
Oh yeah, no, I'm very much in on Anthony Carey. I've drafted quite a few shares of him already. RB 48 in my rankings right now, which doesn't sound like I think he's that elite, but again, in a year like this, like I think he's got even higher upside than what I'm projecting him at right now. I've got him at 180 touches or 180 carries, 30 targets, and that projects out to about 927 rushing yards, 134 receiving yards, and 9 total touchdowns between them. Very much, if they're relying on him like they're kind of talking about it right now in their spring camp reports, I think he could clear that projection potentially, especially with the way KJ Owens was looking last year. Let me talk about that wide receiver you so rudely stole my thunder on. But it was interesting, right? Because again, there was a really good actual breakdown from one of oh my God, I didn't write that. Oh yeah, FIU Sports, like the team's page, they had a really good video that kind of broke down what's been going on in camp so far, and they mentioned that the standout at wide receiver is McGuire Anderson. Now McGuire, as the kids say, earned quite a bit of clout at the end of last year. He scored a 97-yard kick return in the bowl game. Granted, that was a game they lost like 57-20 in, but still, when you're losing a game like that, you got a guy returning a 97-yard kick return touchdown. Pretty exciting. And it does seem like he's kind of carrying the momentum into this spring camp here. And given what we saw Alex Perry do down the stretch for the Panthers last year, he finished 92 targets, 840 yards, nine touchdowns, and was a top 5 wide receiver for CFF in the second half of the season. I sort of have to be paying attention when a new name is highlighted here. But as you mentioned, I really can't go crazy with this as much as I want to identify the system here and say, like, look what Alex Perry did last year. This is their next guy up. Problem is Anderson as a wide receiver just wasn't great last year. He only had 11 yards per catch, only caught 56% of his balls. And as a majority slot guy, that's really not great. His touchdown rate is only 2.2%. Let's compare this to, the likes of Alex Perry or Tajuan Palmer, who was the leading wide receiver back when the OC was at UAB. Both of those guys were averaging 15 yards per catch. They had a 60-plus completion percentage. They both had 9-plus touchdown rates. So, obviously, again, Anderson just on his career so far just has not matched any of those whatsoever. Yeah. So that's troubling. And even more troubling is if Anderson was like a younger guy, I'd be more inclined to believe that he could kind of make a big jump coming into his second year starting. Except he's kind of been a guy who's been in college since 2021. And he only just now recorded his first receiving stats last year. So, Yeah, he's going to stay near the bottom of my CFF rankings. He'll be there because he's currently the best option we have at FIU, and he could make that huge jump, but I'm still not drafting him super high. I've got him he entered my rankings at wide receiver 112. But for those of you who want these late round dart throws who have potential upside here, you're banking on the upside of the system here and him really taking a huge step here in his final season. Any thoughts on that, Chris? Or you want to hit an ad break here?
You know what? I'm gonna write McGuire's name down in pencil, and he's gonna be a guy that I'm gonna take a shot on late. So other than that, you can hit the break, brother.
Let's go ahead and hit the break if you're listening over on the Campus Can Podcast Network. If not, you'll see us back here in just a second. Appreciate y'all. And write that. All right, we are back. Chris, I hope you enjoyed your 5-second break there.
Did.
Let's go ahead and move on here. Where do I want to go next? It's my turn to pick a school here. Let's go to Nebraska. Nebraska's got a lot of interesting stuff kind of going on here. Unfortunately, not quite as much clarity as I'd want, but especially at the wide receiver position. But we won't talk about the wide receiver position here because I think the most interesting thing going on here is the running back position, right? Obviously, we lose Emmett Johnson. He was RB3 last year. The Cornhuskers do not go and grab a running back out of the portal, which I noted a couple of beat reporters thought was a mistake coming into spring camp. Well, it seems like that issue might be starting to be solved here a little bit. I'm not saying that this person is going to be Emmett Johnson by any stretch of the imagination, but it seems like they're getting a little bit more bang for their buck than they were expecting. And that is, according to Pete Nakos, true freshman running back Jamal Rule has been, quote, the story of the spring and has been performing extremely well in spring camp so far. And obviously, like I said, we cannot expect him to repeat, Johnson's numbers again. That'd be absolutely insane. But it definitely does throw a wrinkle into things, right? Especially if you, like me, have kind of thrown some dart throws at, Mekhi Nelson, who I personally was projecting as the RB1, and it seems like based on ADP, that's what a lot of people are kind of projecting as the RB1 for Nebraska. But man, these true freshmen like to come in and throw some wrinkles in here. So, Chris, you got any thoughts on that?
I'm kind of just a little hesitant on who I want to take out of the backfield. Like you said, you had Mekhi Nelson. I was kind of leading towards Isaiah Mosey, the wide receiver turned running back, as I think he might see a little bit more of the target share coming out of the backfield. And if you're playing in any kind of PPR or any kind of boost leagues where the running back sees a little bit more points on receptions or anything like that, that could be the value pick out of this backfield because of the receiving prowess. But for me right now, the news is telling me Jamal Rule, the history or what they had in the backfield last year with the exit of Emmett Johnson might be leaning towards Mekhi Nelson. But as of right now, I am stuck on Isaiah Mosey being the fantasy asset out of this backfield, Jared.
All righty, interesting call. Again, we definitely know that, again, Dana Holgerson has proven the last 2 years he is not afraid to throw to the running back whatsoever. But maybe that changes this year because, again, there's a lot of interesting notes about this passing game here where it very much feels like it's going to be a very different offense than what we saw last year. One of the interesting notes that I saw from Dana Holgerson was him talking about Anthony Calandria saying, I've never had this mobile of a QB. My brother in Christ, you had Derek King as your quarterback for years. Like, if you think Calandria is more mobile of a quarterback, how much do you plan to run Calandria? Like, I have Calandria as QB 76 right now. After that quote, I feel worse about that ranking by the day. So that's interesting thing number one. The other interesting thing is how they're talking about this passing game, right? It really feels like that they're going to be a lot more aggressive on offense this year, taking more downfield shots. Ethan and Chris covered this really well in Ball with My Bestie, so I hope I would encourage you guys to go check out their latest episode last week when they talked about Anthony Calandria. But really the general gist here is that, they're going to take more shots downfield. They're trying to extend plays. They're trying to really make sure they don't give up on plays. And to me, that screams less checkdowns to the running back and more let's try to hit the big plays when they are there. And so that's exciting to hear. It definitely gives me more hope about the wide receivers. Unfortunately, there wasn't really offered much up about who the standout at wide receiver has been. I know in the Slack, I saw that there was some talk that, an Isaiah Hunter might be the standout right now. I personally wasn't able to find any kind of notes on like backing that up personally, but I trust the guys in our room, and I'm sure they saw it from some credible source somewhere that I just missed. But Chris, any general thoughts on this? And then I also see you have a little note here about a certain tight end. Where are you hearing this from?
Yeah, I have to double check the source on that, but from what I was gathering last night, just putting together some notes, is Janarian Bonner, tight end for Nebraska, could see quite a bit of usage in this offense. But for me, my guy right now is Isaiah Hunter. I believe Nate Marquise touched on it last week when we were breaking down ADP, and I pinpointed Isaiah Hunter as one of my favorite values. And he mentioned that I'm not too sure where he heard it from. I'd have to go back and listen to that and bring that up. But he mentioned that there was a report that came out that said if the receivers see Anthony Calandrio kind of break out of pocket and if they see the play breaking down, they have free ability to kind of find space and get open, whether that's downfield, across the field, coming back towards the quarterback. So I think that kind of potential aspect of Nebraska, just looking to continue to move the chains and stay on the field offensively, is going to work out well for some of these pass catchers. So for right now, at least, I got Isaiah Hunter being the guy, and then it's a toss up of Quasi Gilmore or Ja'Cory Barney. But as for tight end wise, Janarian Bonner has been the name that I've seen in at least one report of taking the tight end one snaps for the Cornhuskers, man.
That's interesting because PFF has Bonner listed as a wide receiver. So I wonder if he made that switch this offseason, or I'll have to check in on that. I will say I'm not super impressed with his stats. He's averaged 5.8 yards per catch in 3 years at Nebraska. So
yeah, not the sexiest stuff.
Not the sexiest stuff, though. Chris, why don't you find us a sexier topic to talk about here? And I'm never gonna say that again on the podcast. Chris, save me here. Who are we talking about next?
Oh, you said find a sexy one, and then I was just like, man, I was gonna go with Missouri just because it was the easy one here, and I still think that's gonna be the one I'm gonna take here. They've named their QB1 in Austin Simmons, and that gives you just a little bit of stability heading into draft season, but it doesn't automatically mean that this becomes a high output offense, or at least fantasy offense, because we haven't really seen all that from Austin Simmons. A lot of that still depends on what the system produces. And when you look at the recent stops, the production hasn't really translated into big fantasy ceilings for the Mizzou quarterback. So this feels more like an offense where you're getting usable weeks, but not difference-making ones, and that matters when you're drafting, because there's a difference between someone who fills a lineup and someone you're actually relying on to win you the week. So even with the QB clarity, I'm still viewing this as a lower ceiling environment overall. I think it's more of a depth offense than a counterpiece offense for CFF. Of course, I kind of like what it does for Caden Lee, the potential wide receiver one for Mizzou, and the relationship that he has with Austin Simmons. I was a little low on Caden Lee at the beginning of the process here, but seeing as how Mizzou's kind of, come in and said, hey, Austin Simmons is going to be our guy, the relationship matters somewhat when trying to identify who the go-to pass catcher is going to be for this offense. So, I mean, that's really pretty much all I've got out of Mizzou. We're still expecting Ahmad Hardy to be the guy. I don't think there's much going to change in that role. But what have you heard for this offense there, Jared?
I would say one. Obviously, I like Caden Lee. I have him ranked in my rankings, but don't count out Donovan Olukbade either. Again, very solid as
Yeah.
a true
Yep.
freshman last year. He and Lee seem like they're the pretty locked in starters right now at wide receiver. We'll see if there's a third guy that potentially emerges there, but those are definitely the two guys to watch there. Obviously Simmons is QB1 as you mentioned. I would hope so. Matt Zollers was straight basura last year, like just not good at all. I was surprised anybody was considering this a legit competition, considering we're getting this news here in the spring. It's clear the coaching staff didn't think there was much of a competition between these two either. But even with Simmons, getting the job here, I've already been treating him as basically the locked-in QB1 for this system already, and I've still got him QB 91 right now. Right,
Ooh.
not great. The projections are heavily hampered by what Chip Lindsey's had to work with the last 2 years. Right, he had freshman Bryce Underwood last year, and the year before that he had Jacoby Criswell at North Carolina. That's what's mostly baked into the projections here. I'm feeling generous. I could kind of boost up those Drake May numbers from 3 years ago into the equation, because that was technically Chip Lindsey as well, and that's easily the best quarterback production we've gotten out of a Chip Lindsey quarterback in some years, and Drake May absolutely was a fantasy relevant quarterback during that point. But I have not really been shown anything by Austin Simmons to tell me that he is even remotely close to the talent that Drake May was. He's also not really playing in the ACC as well. So I'm hesitant to really incorporate that too much. Just overall, I'm singing a very different tune about Austin Simmons this year. He's just not a quarterback with a skill set that makes me super excited to really draft him really at all, because like by the time we're getting into like QB 90, like I'm going to be willing to reach down a little bit further in my rankings at that point to, grab some guys with more rushing upside. Like Austin Simmons or EJ Colson at UTEP. I'd probably take EJ Colson just because, again, there's more rushing upside. Keldrick Luster at Ball State. Like, again, just a bunch of guys that just, I'll take the upside of, them having some really big weeks versus like Simmons feels like a locked in 18 to 20 points guy per week. So, all right, let's keep it moving here. Let's touch on, I think, not the last Power 4 program though here, but let's talk about Florida. Not too much to talk about here. Really, the main thing I want to highlight here is, or really just have this discussion on, what are we doing with the wide receivers here at Florida? Because to me, going into this year, it'd be hard to differentiate between Dallas Wilson and Eric Singleton, right? Dallas Wilson, very much the talent. Eric Singleton, the veteran, coming into his senior year, played 2 years under Buster Faulkner at Georgia Tech there. But Dallas Wilson's out this spring. I don't know if he's planning on coming back this spring or not, but he's been out so far. And with him out, Eric Singleton is the clear wide receiver 1 as of right now. His name is just getting mentioned in report after report. And again, that makes sense given, what Singleton's been able to do in this system before. Is it about time that we start kind of getting a bit more aggressive on treating Singleton as the clear wide receiver 1? Or do we still hold out hope for Dallas Wilson right now? How are you treating this, Chris?
I was originally treating it as Dallas Wilson being the guy, but I've kind of been more sold on Eric Singleton because of the familiarity with the system, especially at the beginning of the season. There's been reports that he's been really showing his speed in that offense. So that's another big thing for me. If he can really start stretching the field and everything like that, there's a real good chance there that Eric Singleton becomes the guy for Florida. So that's really where I'm going to be putting Eric Singleton in this wide receiver room. Their ADP, when you look at their ADP, though, Wilson currently wide receiver 64, Singleton at wide receiver 66. It's basically the same price. So the market hasn't really separated the two yet. But the situation is kind of starting to, with Dallas Wilson being out and Eric Singleton really getting the wide receiver one load. So that's really going to be the guy I'm going to lean on early, just because the path feels a little bit cleaner right now than it does for any other pass catcher in this room. And then, I'm excited for Jaden Bach, man.
Oh yeah,
Give me all
obviously Jaden Ball's great, but I'll ask
give
you
me all
this, Chris. Is this more stock down for Dallas Wilson or stock up for Eric Singleton? Like, if you're looking at your rankings right now, are you moving Singleton up? Are you moving Dallas Wilson down? Is it a combination of the two? What are you doing?
It's maybe a little bit of the combination of two, but I'm probably moving Eric Singleton up more than I'm moving Dallas Wilson down.
All
You
right.
get what I'm kind of going with that? So I'm okay moving Eric Singleton up 10 to 15 spots with the more reports that are coming out. Then I am comfortable moving Dallas Wilson down 10 to 15 spots because the talent's there for Dallas Wilson. Of course, a lot of this is going to uh, um, it's gonna bank on the quarterback play and who's gonna emerge as the quarterback one for them. Right now, it's looking like Aaron Philo, but yeah, right for me in the wide receiver room, at least for right now, Eric Singleton has jumped Dallas Wilson for me.
All righty. All right, Chris, where do you want to go from here? We got 1, 2, 3 teams left.
Let's go Wake Forest, the
All right.
Demon Deacons. And I think the part that stands out with Wake is how the continuity actually translates for fantasy. You got Gio Lopez teaming up with his offensive coordinator in South Alabama in Rob Ezell, which is kind of going to bring some comfortability is not really a word. I can't even say it, but it's bringing some comfortable. It's making Gio Lopez comfortable in the system. He kind of looked out of place at North Carolina at times, and it's going to usually lead to cleaner and early execution, and that matters for fantasy because those are the offenses that don't waste time in those first few weeks trying to figure things out. Of course, there's going to be some new nuances to this offense that Izell's bringing from his time at Alabama going to Wake Forest. But I'm going to be, and so instead of asking who's going to be the breakout in this offense, I'm looking for who benefits right away from the stability. And that's where I think this offense can quietly be useful. And I think that's Carlos Hernandez, wide receiver, or the potential wide receiver one for Wake Forest, Jared.
I mean, yeah, I've been a Carlos Hernandez fan for as long as I can feel. I got him at wide receiver 25 right now. His ADP is wide receiver 44, so I've been grabbing my shares of him here and there. I'm like, with these reports again, they just treat him as a foregone conclusion. They're just like, yeah, Hernandez is going to do Hernandez things, and that gives me more confidence. He's been moving up my rankings again here in the last couple of weeks because of that. I think I had him down at like wide receiver 40 something. I've moved him up into my top 25 again. Like, we just know that Ezell, coming from that major Applewhite system, is going to want to feature one guy. Another name people need to kind of keep an eye on here, though, if you're looking for almost a potential handcuff at wide receiver, say, God forbid, something happens to Hernandez, he decides he wants to take up underwater basket weaving instead, Cam Shanks, the former Arkansas and UAB wide receiver, is kind of being said to be the standout at wide receiver 2. And so it took Chris a minute to realize what I said about Carlos Hernandez.
I was like, wait a second.
But yeah, Cam Shanks would be the guy maybe to take a shot on late if that's your strategy at wide receiver, right? But also, again, given how much instability there is at wide receiver this year, I don't know how much you really wanted to do, handcuffs at wide receiver. But
yeah.
But I agree with you. I've been reading the same thing about how Gio Lopez looks very comfortable in a system that he already knows here. This is quite frankly where he should have transferred to begin with, like last year. Like, if he's going to move up, but I don't blame him for going, heeding the call of Bill Belichick of all people. Like, hey, come be my quarterback at the college level. Yeah. I don't know a quarterback that might say no to that, right? So, all right, let's finish up here. Let's head over to Temple. That'll be my nice spot here. Again, not a program we really talk about a lot here, but they've actually been getting really, really good practice reports over on their team page. And the name that really sticks out that I just keep reading over and over and over again. This is a guy that I thought about talking about in our FCS transfers episode, but I was like, maybe I don't really want to talk about a Temple wide receiver here. Well, I was wrong to do so because former Stony Brook wide receiver Jace Freeman, like I said, all over these Temple practice reports. He was great for Stony Brook last year. 41 catches, 774 yards, and 8 touchdowns, averaging almost 19 yards a catch. Obviously playing above his level of competition here. Now to head over here to Temple. So how do I break this down? Right? System-wise, you don't love the history here, right? Like offensive coordinator Tyler Walker, granted he's only been offensive coordinator for 2 years, but really not known for wide receiver. Neither at Montana State nor at Temple. He's never had a wide receiver hit 70 targets in a single season. Like I said, very limited sample size though. Meanwhile, head coach Casey Keeler isn't afraid of having one guy get funneled compared to the rest of the option, but he's never really had that truly elite option in his history. He's had some, high 700, low 800, or mid 800 yard guys before, but never really that 900, 1,000 yard wide receiver that we really look for here. But again, I can't ignore the fact that Freeman is just making play after play after play. And when you're a program like Temple, you got to take advantage of when you think you have a talent like this, right? It wasn't that long ago that Temple had Dante Wright go absolutely nuts over 9 games here with 87 targets, 62 receptions, almost 800 yards, 6 touchdowns. Again, that's in 9 games. Again, should clarify, Dante Wright was a different coaching staff, right? But this is the reality of where you're at when you're a program like Temple, right? All their best options transfer out, right? I mean, they kept Peter Clark by the grace of God, right? But when you have big time guys, you don't have the depth that you used to have, right? Even as a program like Temple, you got to use the best guys you have. So if Freeman continues to get good reports here, I wouldn't be shocked if this is kind of a system trend breaker that I'm going to call out here. Again, he's not super high in my rankings. I'll be very clear. He's higher than a lot of the other guys I've talked about today, though. I put him at wide receiver 74. To give you an idea, that's just behind Deuce Alexander at Ole Miss, Marcel Williams at Akron, and just ahead of Yannick Smith at SMU and Javen Robinson at Utah State. That's kind of the tier I'm putting him in. Thoughts, Chris?
Yeah. I mean, I like the call with Freeman there. The reports have been great. When you're dealing with an offense like Temple, you're not specifically chasing efficiency. You're chasing opportunity. And Freeman could absolutely see the opportunity in this offense because even in systems that don't traditionally feature wide receivers, volume can still get forced to that one guy. And Freeman has all the opportunity to be that one guy with the early camp buzz that he's getting like this. So I'm not going to overthink a program like Temple. If Freeman wins that role, that's the value.
All righty, let's finish up here. We got Tulane as our last school here. You want me to take this, Chris, or you got thoughts here?
I got just minor thoughts. Just with the quarterback position. It really isn't just about who starts. It's about how this offense is going to function because the two quarterbacks are going to bring you two different playing styles in Caden Simonza and Zion Chris. Of course, we're all attacking the running back in Jamori McClure. We haven't really heard too much news on Jamari McClure. That might just be because there is no competition in this backfield. He's going to be the guy. They don't really need to talk about it because there's no reason for any kind of conversation to be had at the backfield. But for me, I'm trying this entire offense. I'm tying this entire offense to the quarterback outcome, especially when it comes to McClure's ceiling, because if he gets Simonza, who's not the traditional dual threat quarterback, his touchdown usage can his touchdown usage can kind of go up a bit when they get into the goal line situations. But if they lean towards Zion Chris, then that might hamper his production just a little bit because of those goal line situations. Wide receiver wise, I don't think there's really been any reports kind of pinpointing one guy as the real standout. I don't know if you've heard anything different on that, Jared, but as for Tulane, that's really what I'm waiting for, is who's going to be the quarterback, the starting quarterback for the Green Wave.
It's interesting because you do bring up a good point about, if Simone's is the quarterback, that's going to open up opportunities for a guy like McClure, right? But also, I'm over here sitting here being like, please, for the love of God, let Zion Chris Gramillion win this job, because Simone's
does he got two names now?
Yeah, it's Zion Chris Gramillion.
Oh, okay. It
it
wasn't always.
No, it was not always that way. But yeah, Zion Chris Gramillion is his last name now. But yeah, Simone's practically had Summerall begging for a spring quarterback edition last year after, getting a full spring of him splitting reps with, I forget, it was the Illinois quarterback that came in as well, and he ended up doing nothing either. So, like, I pray to God it's Chris, because I feel like Simone's is going to hamper the offense otherwise. Chris is also more exciting because, again, he does have that dual threat ability. Chris has also been heavily limited in these first days of practice. Now, granted, apparently after they come back from spring break here, the coaching staff has said that he will be full go then. So hold out hope there. Speaking of Jamar McClure, as you kind of mentioned, not really much to talk about there. I think partially it's a foregone conclusion. Haven't seen anything about injuries or anything like that. I will note, though, that Maurice Turner, the former Louisville running back, who I personally had touted as the RB1 last year, he's still around, and apparently he's been looking pretty good here in spring. So maybe that does kind of cause you to have a little bit of concern regarding McClure coming into this year, but that's up to you guys. I'm personally keeping McClure right where I have him right now. You asked me about wide receivers, and I don't want to look because Will Hall has just had such an abysmal history with wide receivers, but kind of like with Temple, Tulane's in a position where if they've got a guy, then they got to use him. And they do have Destin Hill just kind of hanging around here. Yes, that Destin Hill, I'm sure every, Devi and C2C guy listening to this podcast right now is groaning like you wouldn't believe right now.
Oh, my gosh.
This is a former blue chipper, right? Moving down to Tulane here. He hasn't worked out at any of the stops he's been at so far, at least at the Power 4 level, but he's finally moving down to competition. And the buzz has been pretty solid on him so far. Again, he's made some plays. He had a 65-yard touchdown in the scrimmage that they had. By no means am I throwing him into my rankings and throwing him up, into my top 50 wide receivers or anything. If I do put him in here, he's almost certainly probably going to be outside the top 100. But, just a name to kind of a name to stash for later. And, if he ends up doing well later this season, I will tell every single one of you I told you so, because I made a random mention of him back in March 22nd of 2026. I'll be like, yes, see, I was right, even though I'm very hesitant saying all this right now. So yeah, that's all I've got on Tulane there. Again, a lot of notes there, a lot of spring camps opening this week. So again, we're going to continue this series.
Big ones
next week. A lot of big ones in the SEC, Big Ten here as well. You got Ole Miss, LSU, Illinois, Iowa, Maryland, Minnesota, Penn State, Rutgers, Miami, North Carolina, SMU, Arizona, Kansas, and Kansas State all opening this week. And that doesn't even touch on a lot of the G5 programs that are going, or G6, I should say. G6 programs that are opening up this week. But unfortunately, On3 does not provide me a beautiful graphic on when those spring camps start. So didn't have time to write all those down. We also got spring games around the corner already. We got Coastal Carolina this weekend. We got Nebraska and Clemson are both this weekend as well. We'll touch on those, I imagine, Chris. And then after we do spring camp reports next week, it'll be spring games, and then before we know it, man, it'll be May, and we're gonna be in the midst of full on off season.
Can't wait, Jared.
Can't wait. Got any thoughts before we get out of here, Chris?
Nothing solid. Heading to Las Vegas for the first time of my life this week. So if you see me down there, come up. I'll beers on Chris. Yeah, I'm looking forward to having a time down there. It's bitter cold where I'm at, and they're having a heat warning in Las Vegas, so I cannot wait, Jared.
Heat warning in Las Vegas sounds like the absolute worst. But I've never been to Las Vegas. I've wanted to go,
Yeah.
but I cannot speak from personal experience. But I'm sure you're gonna have a great time.
Yeah,
So,
looking forward to it.
alrighty, y'all. With that, we have come to the end of our show. Appreciate all of you guys for listening. Like I said before, if you have not already, make sure you leave a like, a comment, and subscribe if you're watching this on the YouTube side of things. If you're on the podcast side of things, follow the show, leave a 5-star review wherever you can. Make sure you check out the rest of the Campus to Canton podcast network for shows ranging on pretty much anything you can think of related to the college fantasy game. We'll see you guys back here next week. Like I said, we'll discuss some more spring camp news, update you on some of these rooms we may have talked about here today. It really is entirely dependent on what news we are provided. Until then, really appreciate you guys and hope you guys have a wonderful and blessed week. See y'all.